Welcome to the serialized version of my book, You're the Last Person I Thought Could Quit Smoking. I hope you'll use it to finally stop killing yourself with cigarettes. Watch all the chapters and learn why and how I quit after 45 years of loving to smoke a lot. You are the last person I thought would quit smoking. A love story about why and how I quit smoking successfully after 45 years, and how you can do it too, with images from an amazing collection of objects originally created to convey the glamour, sophistication, and fun of something that could eventually kill you. By me, Mick Anger, with Mike Harkins. Forward. You are beginning to admit that maybe, just maybe, you ought to think about quitting. You've taken the first step. You're looking at this book. You're standing in a bookstore, or maybe you're reading a sneak peek of this online on your computer or e-reader. Maybe you're watching it on YouTube. It could be that you've taken this exact kind of first step before. That's okay. Let's consider this your last first step. We all know, even those of you who won't say it out loud, that smoking is a real addiction. I won't blow smoke, yeah, bad pun intended, and tell you that this book makes quitting easy and painless, because nothing can ease the slow, sometimes agonizing psychological and physical withdrawal from an addiction, in spite of whatever you may have heard or want to believe about ending your cigarette habit. I will tell you that I quit after more than 45 years as a dedicated lover of smoking, and I did it by doing everything described on these pages. I did it on the first try 3 years ago and counting without a relapse. I was, as you may be, an avoider when it came to even thinking about quitting. It scared me enough that I'd smoke several cigarettes in a row to get over my anxiety about quitting. I knew I'd need a miracle to help me. I was wrong and I was right. I was wrong about needing a miracle to quit. What I needed was the system I created. I was right, though, about a miracle. The miracle wasn't that I was able to quit. The miracle would be that Linda, the love of my life, didn't die when she got terribly sick, that she'd still be with me after months in a coma, and that she'd eventually recover and successfully relearn to do all the things we take for granted, like walk, talk, and breathe. The real miracle was that in Linda's stepping back from the transom of death's door, I would be forced to successfully end a 45-year smoking habit, devise a way to do what I had no choice but do, and would then be able to share my method and my story with you. I pray that you never go through what Linda and I experienced. My circumstances were such that I had to quit, and I did, but it's my ability to have remained a non-smoker for over 3 years that supports what may be the most important revelation of my method, that if I was able to quit, period, with no slips or remorse, then every smoker has that same capability. You're the last person I thought could quit smoking. That was the near universal response from my friends. They knew, because I made no bones about it, that I smoked a lot, because I loved smoking. I loved it. When I had to quit, I knew I would have to find my own unique way to do it. You want to quit too? Or maybe you're thinking about it. I understand. I've been in your smoke-filled shoes. This is a major decision. After all, you've probably been smoking since you were quite young. I started when I was around 13. My parents both smoked, as did more than half of the adults in the country at the time. It was the 60s. Everyone smoked. Have you seen the TV show Mad Men? It may be TV, but the show does a great job of replicating 1960s culture. Cigarette smoke wafts ever present through every episode. It's okay to continue smoking as you read this book. We all have to find our own time to do it, and nothing will make you do it until you're ready. It's enough that you're reading this and admitting, at least to yourself, that it's time to seriously consider quitting. My attitude about your continuing to smoke, even as you read this book about quitting cigarette smoking, is what makes my method a bit different, perhaps slightly out of the norm. I've certainly never been anything close to what you might describe as a conformist. More about that in just a bit. And my perspective on the world includes the reality of what a lifelong smoker is up against when he or she decides to quit. As a charter member of the I've Always Smoked Club, I'm not a drill sergeant, physician, or academic. I'm an ex-smoker, and I feel your pain. I can also tell you, which is really the whole point of this book, that you have it within yourself and within your hands to be an ex-smoker. I knew that I would have to find my own method when it was my time to stop, and I wanted it to be as easy and painless as I could make it. Cigs had, among other abilities, always comforted me, and it was scary to think of a life without them. I was a cigarette wimp, and I needed a method that allowed me to quit without going cold turkey. My first aha moment was when I recognized that certain things triggered me to light up. All smokers know what I'm referring to, those times when, without consciously thinking about it, you must have a cigarette in your mouth. When the phone rings, when you pick up the phone to call someone, after eating, and the most important moment of the day, the instant you wake up after being asleep and not smoking for God knows how long. I can now admit that there were times I would wake up in the middle of the night and smoke before going back to sleep. You too? More than likely, you've got your own moments when you have to smoke, I'm sure, in addition to the always there desire for another cig every 20 or 30 minutes of every day of your life. Tough to admit the truth, huh? It just sounds bad, that list of gotta have a cigarette examples up there. Smokers just don't like to think about it and don't want to hear anybody else's opinion either. You just want to keep a lip lock on your friend, your close, close friend, forever. Chapter 1. Everyone Smoked. I sincerely hope that my book will become the method that you use to become a non-smoker forever. I was 58 when I wrote this, and I started to smoke when I was still in grade school, which gives me about 45 years of filling my lungs every waking hour, sometimes more frequently than that, with the chemical-laced smoke from approximately 492,750 cigarettes. Yeah, I know how difficult it is to stop smoking, especially when you love to do it and don't really want to quit. If you bought this book for yourself, good for you and thanks. If you were given this book, perhaps by someone who loves you, let me say Happy New Year, since it seems that many people begin their attempt as a New Year's resolution. If it was a gift, it was from someone who really cares about you, so treasure them as a true friend. As I grew up, it seemed that everyone smoked. Smokers were kings, and the world was our ashtray. We never really considered that some people might not be as fond of our habit as we were. It could be that some smokers today continue to think this way, in spite of the incredible presence of educational and media-delivered anti-smoking material. I was oblivious for a long time, then defiant when I could no longer ignore the unending stream of pressure from the no-smoking juggernaut. Then, in the 1960s, the Surgeon General filed the report that put the first cracks in the tobacco industry's fortress walls. Most of us smokers ignored the reports and the evidence and turned a blind, biased eye toward the images of our friends, neighbors, and family all decomposing in front of us from their lifetime smoking habits. We kept on puffing. We knew a time would come and we'd have to face the truth. It was going to kill us. We could explain away the coughing and the wheezing, ignore the smell, because everybody else smelled bad too, and our sense of smell was shot anyway. But we knew, in our heart of hearts, we knew the truth, that it would kill us sooner or later. We just kept hoping it would be later, much later. Both of my parents smoked before I came into their lives, but many of my aunts and uncles did not. Mom quit in her 50s because of COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, also called emphysema. And my dad continued to puff into his 80s before he died of causes unrelated to smoking. So I didn't exactly have a hereditary tendency towards lung cancer, in my esteemed medical opinion. I picked up the habit when I was still in grade school. It was fairly easy to get away with smoking and smelling bad because my parents smoked, which meant they couldn't really smell it when I had cigarette-scented clothes. Again, in my nuanced opinion back then, the only objection they were entitled to was that it was against the law for a minor to purchase, possess, or use tobacco products in any form until the age of 18. That sure as hell didn't stop me or my friends from smoking. Mom smoked menthols, Salem. Dad was a Winston man. I thought menthols were pretty much for girls and black folks, so I started by stealing my dad's Winstons and tearing off the filters for a more full-bodied smoke, something that made me feel more like a grown-up at the age of 13. I was already following the tobacco company's abhorrent, barely subliminal appeals to my emerging sense of self-identity, choosing the appropriate brands according to my profile. I was a white male Catholic, and I took up the brand that most appealed to me. My grandfather had smoked Camels when he was city editor on the Akron Beacon Journal in the 1930s and 40s. I still remember his story about the introduction of the Camel brand. The company put up billboards that said, "The Camels are coming." He and everyone else thought it was an ad for the circus. In my race to become a grown-up and do adult things, it was natural for me to take up smoking as soon as I could, since it was a part of my world from the earliest years of my life. To me and my generation, smoking was just about the most adult, glamorous thing we could do. Well, that and drinking alcohol, which everyone began to experiment with by the 7th grade. I don't know why, but that one never appealed to me. I watched my friends drinking malt liquor by the canal, and the thought of stumbling around and puking wasn't my idea of a good time. I managed to dodge that peer pressure and never developed a taste or attraction to drinking. To this day, a glass or two of Drambuie at Christmas is the extent of my intake of alcohol. It just never made my list of vices to cultivate. I seem to have no problem, however, with marijuana, which I started smoking at 15. I never looked back. I started my lifelong addiction with the hard stuff, Lucky Strikes, and experimented through my grade school years with all sorts of what I thought of as exotic brands like English Ovals, Benson & Hedges Regulars, Philip Morris Commanders, and Pall Malls, before I finally settled on Camel Straights for the next 10 years. I figured that if I was going to smoke, I might as well pick a brand that was a no-nonsense and contained plenty of what we smokers were looking for in a cigarette, whatever that was. Turned out that what it was lots of the stuff that was sure to kill us all eventually. Camels fit the bill, and their package design was aesthetically superior to anything on the market, before or since. Being artistically minded, that mattered to me. I still think it looks great as a commercial design. I used to put empty packs on my Christmas tree as ornaments. I once wallpapered a breakfast nook in my home with them. It looked great to me at the age of 22, and by integrating my habit into other parts of my life, it created a web of existence where everything I did, creatively and practically, reinforced my love of smoking and fused my addiction with every waking moment. I loved to smoke. Then, in the late 70s, the anti-tobacco propaganda started having an effect on me, and I switched to True 100s, a lower tar, ultralight brand, which I thought had a full flavor and satisfying bite. I swore my loyalty to the brand even though it complicated my life. The brand was difficult to find as I traveled around the country and essentially impossible to obtain anywhere outside of America. It has been my curse throughout life that I inevitably make choices to obtain that which is difficult to find, a kind of test of my sincerity. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. The harder something is to find, the more desirable it is. Go figure. Because of this, when I traveled around the world as a roadie, I was forced to buy all the cigarettes I would need for the length of the tour to avoid the international tariffs levied on tobacco products. I'd distribute the cartons between the members of my crew so they could carry them through customs for me. Thus began my habit of purchasing cigarettes in quantity, which led to one of my basic tenets of my system, the pile of smokes that signals the end of your smoking life. It's explained in Chapter 10. Slowly, people I used to call the tobacco Nazis, remember my reasoning was addled by nicotine, began to rise up against us, and life began to get complicated. A genuinely weird thing is that until I started to write this book, I always thought of those who were against smoking as Nazis because they insisted on having their way. Only now does it dawn on me that the smokers are the problem. Hey, you have to deal with it. Because they insist that everyone should think the same way they do. Odd, isn't it? That it took me this long to see the irony in my attitude when I was driven by my addiction to smoking? There is, I think, a lesson here, somewhere, about how we are immune to the criticism of others when it is not convenient for us to pay attention, or until we come around to their way of thinking. Hardcore smokers may still think that no one notices that they're smoking, and those who do notice, well, screw them. It's still a free country, isn't it? The first major hit to my smoker lifestyle was the elimination of smoking on airplanes. Now, of course, there's a whole generation of smokers and non-smokers who are amazed to find out that smoking was actually allowed on planes. But back in the day, few of us went quietly into the night of you could no longer smoke on airplanes. That one made me mad. What else was there to do on a plane anyway? How dare they tell us we couldn't smoke when it was just as easy to give us our own section? Just put up a door with a curtain if you don't like the smell. Sheesh. I promptly labeled this the toe of the fascist boot and went on ignoring the inevitable. It was going to take a lot more than that to diminish my love of smoking and my pursuit, wherever I was, no matter the time, of a nicotine fix. I figured I could go on forever smoking and the world would just have to live with it. My collections of ashtrays and lighters continued to grow. A continuous stream of my dollars went out of my wallet. A couple of packs a day went into my lungs. But I liked it, and no one was going to tell me not to do it. And the money and my health and all those other things, well, you like it too, or you probably wouldn't be reading this. But that also implies that you know the time's coming when, inevitably, it's your time to quit. And it doesn't matter how you feel about it or what excuses or rationale you've been relying on for the last umpteen years. The evidence is compelling, the science irrefutable, and your body's sense of self-preservation makes it progressively more and more difficult to smoke without exacting some physical price. And emotionally, you're feeling the guilt for what you're doing to yourself. I kept a record throughout my smoking life of quotes from other smokers, some from notable celebrities who had views similar to mine. They helped me conveniently ignore the negative aspects of my smelly habit. How could something so pleasurable be bad? Actress Mary Tyler Moore had a quote I really liked, maybe from an interview in TV Guide magazine, I can't recall. Peer pressure eventually forced her to quit, but she stated that she never smoked a cigarette that I did not thoroughly enjoy. I repeated that often when challenged by someone to quit. No one was going to change my mind. No one except me, that is. Perhaps my all-time favorite point of view came from Lin Yutang, as expressed in his book, Pleasures of a Nonconformist. His book focused on various habits, practices, and routines of everyday living, with his perspectives on how to derive from everything the maximum benefits and pleasure, from getting up in the morning to lying in bed to sitting in chairs. In the chapter devoted to extolling the pleasures and benefits derived from smoking, including its use as an aid to pleasant conversation and contemplation, he concludes by stating that there are so many positive things to come from smoking that if you know someone who has quit smoking, perhaps they never really smoked at all. That summed it up perfectly for me. If you didn't like smoking, you didn't know what you were talking about. Along the way, a little voice in my head started to whisper, maybe someday you might want to quit. Just in case they're right about that, it's going to kill you stuff. Thanks for watching this chapter of my book. Come back for the next chapter and to continue on the road of quitting at your own speed like I did. And please let us know how you're doing and if we are helping you to stop smoking once and for all.